We want to say thank you for joining us. We're really happy to have everyone here to learn a little more about the budgeting process and Martus. We're really thrilled to have part of the Martus team here with us. So this is going to be a really great hour with everyone together here. Uh, for those of you who are CPAs and are looking for that golden CPE credit, we are offering that with this session today. You must answer at least 3 of the poll questions. We will have 4 available. You must answer at least 3 of them, and you must be on with us for at least 50 minutes. And we will be emailing you CPE certificates within about 3 weeks or so. So we do hope that you'll be staying on with us at least for that, if not for the fun learning experience you're going to have today. We will have all of the slides available in the chat today. And after the webinar, we'll be giving a little bit more information in some of the slide deck too, so that you'll be able to see some of the demo shots that Joseph is going to be sharing with us today. So these are going to be really helpful for you, or if you want to share them with your friends, bring them to a party. They're going to be pretty spectacular. This webinar is also going to be recorded. So again, we encourage you to share that as well, either to re-jog your memory of things that we've talked about today, or again, feel free to share it with other people in your organization or company, or with other friends that you think that this may be applicable for. This is a very friendly, open webinar today, so we really do encourage questions. Don't be shy. Feel free to reach out in the chat. We have people monitoring that, so we'll try to get to questions as quickly as possible. And if we run out of time within the sections here, we'll make sure to be in touch with you afterwards. So without further ado, my name is Robin Leet. I'm the partner of business process with our business and IT consulting team at AAFCPAs. That's a lot of words there. But I've been with this team for about 11 years now. I came from a background of being a controller and a CFO at many different kinds of companies. And I did a lot of process work and system implementations, and then I would get bored and move on. So I found that this is a really great fit where all I do all day is work with clients to improve processes and get into great systems, one right after another. And that's my full-time job. So I want to introduce Wendy, who's also on my team. Wendy.
Hi, everyone. So I've been with AAFCPAs for about a year and a half now. Prior to coming to the organization, I was the CFO for 2 not-for-profit companies in the human services and behavioral health sector. And prior to that, in mostly for-profit, working in various finance roles in industries such as life sciences, clothing, manufacturing, and telecom. Much like Robin, same story, working at all those different companies, had a wide variety of experiences in business process, change management, and many implementations. And I really enjoyed the work as well, and doing this now at a full-time basis. I have a master's in finance. I am a CPA, as well as a NetSuite ERP consultant certification, and a ton of experience working in various systems from SAP down to QuickBooks and everything in between, as well as other solutions such as maybe CMS, human resource systems, as well as budgeting, which is what we're talking about today. So thank you for joining.
So our team focuses on process and technology. We work to find efficiencies with our clients, really improve their processes to make their day-to-day lives better, really focused on non-manual analytical work where you're adding value to what you're doing. So we want to take in any sort of applications or systems that we can add in there to take out that manual aspect and make your lives better from day to day in your position. And that's what got us connected with Martus.
So we looked at a lot of different solutions on the market. We continue to do so, and even those available within large ERP systems that might have native functionality related to budgeting, and really found that Martus does a fantastic job. It's focused on the great features, that granular level reporting that most companies are looking for at a really great price. So I'll pass it over to Robin now, I think. Are we going back, or are we showing any of the system now?
We actually need everyone to wake up and make sure that we're doing a poll question.
Okay. All
Ding,
right.
ding, ding. So let's get you started with thinking about how you do your budget right now. And then we're going to talk with the Martus team and have some introductions on that side of the house. So I think, Chris, you're up.
Thanks, Robin. Much appreciated. Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Grady, and I head up partnerships here at Martus. Prior to being here, I had a career in both executive operations and development in the nonprofit sector before I moved on and sold Sage Intacct specifically as an ERP to both faith-based organizations, churches, and nonprofits for many years. And then I've been in the FP&A space as well. So been at Martus for about 18, 20 months or so. And it's been a wild ride as we continue to grow and have fantastic partners like AAF that have enthusiasm for our platform and its evolution. I'll turn things over to Joseph now.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, my name is Joseph Pleggy. I've been with Martus for a little over 3.5 years. Serve as the director of our service delivery, so implementation, support, customer success areas. Prior to Martus, I worked for a company where we were implementing consulting on Sage Intacct. And that's where I actually learned about Martus. We'd have clients that would integrate Martus with Sage Intacct and other ERPs there as well. So, we do have connections with over 20 plus ERPs. You see all those different integrations all the time, and looking forward to showing you a little bit more about how Martus works today.
Awesome. And Joseph is one of the best demo people I've ever seen. So you guys are in for a treat today to be able to see him in action. But first, we're going to have Chris talk to us a little bit more about what the system actually is and how it benefits.
Absolutely. So everyone, Martus is driven by budgeting and reporting mechanisms. However, we consider it to be an all-in-one budgeting, reporting, and forecasting platform. We really tout it for its collaborative capability, being able to have budget worksheets assigned to particular managers that then roll up to a consolidated budget. We also kind of are exceptionally excited about the fact that we get tremendous feedback about an approachable user interface. Even individuals that are non-finance employees don't find it a daunting task to actually use Martus for its budget worksheets. And then a really flexible, robust reporting mechanism, both out-of-the-box financial reports and a custom report writer. And then Joseph will even show you how we can have a really robust personnel budgeting module, as well as some forecasting components too.
We have an exciting time in store for everyone. But let's talk about what we see right now. So Wendy and I work with a lot of clients on their budgeting as we're walking through processes. And obviously, one of the biggest things we see is people putting their budgets into Excel. And this is a great solution for a certain size of a company, but at some point, it becomes a little bit too cumbersome and risky to have all of your information in Excel. We've seen workbooks that are actually works of art to try to manipulate Excel to do all the things that they need it to do. We've heard complaints from clients where they can't even open the workbooks anymore because they're so big and cumbersome, the system just collapses on them. So those are very, very distinct signs that you've outgrown Excel, but there are some other parts to it where there really is a lot of risk to keeping your data in Excel. You don't know if formulas get destructed. You don't know if you've added the right cost centers or personnel or things like that, where you're constantly having to keep up with the changes that are going on at your company. And that leads to errors, which leads to mistakes, which can lead to some riskiness when you're doing your budgeting and your projections. So Martus really takes it to that next step. And we're going to talk through some of the bigger areas that Martus helps with now of transitioning from Excel and having it in a workbook style to this platform and how it really involves all of the work processes and helps with that. You're on mute, Chris.
Here I am. Apologies, everybody. First of all, absolutely true. Manual process. So everyone loves our spreadsheets, including me. However, there comes a time when they simply aren't scalable anymore. So Martus sort of provides the familiarity of Excel, but at the same time, adding a ton of workflow automation to where a lot of the concerns around human error, a lot of the concerns about sort of crushed bandwidth as you're emailing attachments of spreadsheets from employee to employee in this very, very lengthy budgeting process, we're consolidating that by hours and hours by giving you automation in the context of the platform. Lacking real-time insights. So with Martus, and you have an API connection. So there's an overnight sync every single night. So we're pulling GL information into Martus to where you're really working with real-time data, more or less. And then if you're changing something in a GL, we even have an on-demand sync. So all the concerns about kind of dated reporting go away. Further, because it's so inexpensive to get users involved, and the concerns through our permission sets, you can allow someone to get into Martus, see the reporting that is relative to them, and a lot of the sensitive data also won't be visible to them either. And of course, because you're getting all of that real-time insight, you can truly be strategic as an organization. You have a single repository for all your budget worksheets, the consolidated budget, and then a host of different out-of-the-box reports and forecasts to where you can actually be making a lot of timely, well-informed decisions with the product. Further, like I said earlier, collaboration issues and challenges. When we have a single sort of centralized place to look at all budget worksheets, consolidate budget itself, and even personnel planning, it allows, visibility for everyone to collaborate in a single instance. Further scalability issues, the platform is incredibly flexible. You can have as many users as you like. And we have customers, very small nonprofits that'll have a single user pack of 5. And then we even serve some, tribal organizations that have 400 or 500 users. So you benefit from the product being especially flexible as well.
So we're going to go through and do some demos in Martus now. So you'll actually get to see the system in action. And we're going to be able to see all of these features that Chris has talked about on the screen with Joseph. And we're going to go through one by one some of these features that we found are really popular with the people that we work with. So we can highlight some of these activities right in the system for you. So Wendy's going to start by talking about the reporting and dashboarding features.
Yeah, so the reporting and dashboards, great feature of Martus. Many companies struggle with the reporting tools that they have available to them, even within their own GL system. And Martus is simple to use. It's really intuitive. You have the ability to really slice and dice your information or your data in many different ways in your different segmentations or dimensions that you might use, like grants or projects, programs, whatever it may be, to really get a detailed view of your operations. You even have the ability to create your own reports with the report writer that Chris mentioned earlier, and really just be able to, take advantage of real-time information, including actuals against those budgeted numbers. So I will pass it over to Joseph so you can actually see it in action.
All right, thanks, Wendy. I'm going to share my screen here and give you a little overview on the reporting and dashboards. So when your team logs into Martus, they're going to have the option to utilize these pre-built reports. They're out of the box, ready to use. And you'll see at the top, just to kind of give you a little quick overview, how Wendy was talking about dimensions. And so in my demo environment here, I have 3 dimensions. I have a location, department, and project dimension. This, of course, will reflect, the dimensions, the different tags on transactions that you're using in your system. But these dimensions allow us to filter the different reports here inside of Martus and slice and dice that data. Now, one thing I do want to point out is I'm an admin user right now inside of Martus, and so that means I get to see everything. All the data, everything is available to me. But as other users from your team would log into Martus, you probably don't want them seeing and doing everything, right? So that's where our user permissions come in as it relates to these reports and even how they can budget. Someone like Ed, when he logs in, notice that he doesn't have all permissions to all areas of the system. He's not going to get personnel budgeting or certain other features. He will see the reports, but those reports will be limited to the dimensions he has access to. And what I mean by that is if we say, Ed, you only have access to the main location, that's all you're going to see on the reports. Furthermore, on the departments, we're going to restrict Ed to specific departments or programs. And so you can restrict users to any dimension inside of Martus, those different dimension values, so that when they log into Martus and they're looking at this dashboard or other reports here, they're only seeing the data that you want them to see. Now, I'm going to go over here to our income statement and show you how easy the reports are to consume here and analyze. So right now we're looking at the income statement, and I'm showing my rows in the account view, and I've got my columns set to months. Now there are no filters in place either. So I'm just going to walk you through this first, then I'll show you some of the flexibility. So you notice the rows, right? Those are set to the accounts. My columns are set to months. So I'm looking at my actuals, January through September. I can see budget there for September and what that monthly variance is. Our year-to-date numbers, right? What that year-to-date variance is, annual budget, and what's remaining. Now, before I do any kind of view modifications on this, let me point out that color blue. In Martus, blue is going to be drillable. I can drill into the budget, so as I start seeing variances like that, I might want to see those underlying assumptions of what's driving that original amount. We'll talk about budgets a little bit later. But while we're here, let me talk about the drill down even on the transactions, these actuals. So when I drilled into office supplies there for January, it brought me to a transactions detail report where I can see a listing of all the different transactions that have synced in from the accounting system into Martus. And I can see memos and descriptions and again, how that was coded. Now keep in mind, if users have been restricted, right, they're not going to see all of this data. Furthermore, on the accounts, we have the opportunity here to set certain accounts to be what we call restricted in Martus. And what that means is if a user does not have permissions to see restricted accounts, maybe those are personnel accounts, when they're looking at a report, they're not going to even see those accounts on their report. So they can't see that activity. Or maybe you don't want them drilling down into certain accounts. That's another permission that you can set on accounts and users, that drill down option. Right? But let's talk about the flexibility. They're real easy to use up here without having to create a brand new report from scratch. Maybe I want to see an account category view on my rows instead. So account categories are kind of like groups of accounts where I get a summary level based upon different accounts in these groups. So I can quickly modify the rows real easy. Maybe I want to look at departments at a higher level. We'll start putting dimensions on rows. Or if I don't want to see all months and just the current month and year to date on my columns, again, very easy to modify that view. Or perhaps we want to go back to the account view. Notice you can also go quarterly. You can show things year over year, or even expand columns by a dimension. So this time I'll put my accounts on the rows and my columns to the dimensions. So I'm seeing year-to-date activity right now by my different departments or programs. So again, lots of flexibility. That's just on the income statement. You can export these to Excel or PDF. You can save reports. One of the ones I like to show here, I've got a grant and it's brought us here to our multi-year budget to actuals report. What's nice about this is I've actually filtered for that specific grant. It could be any dimension, right? Department, location, program. Now with this one, I've got a date range set for January of 21 through December of 22. That can be any date range that you'd want to set there, but I can see each year's activity for this specific grant and then what that total is. So I have a total award of $500,000. We spent about $468,000. So we still have a draw of about $31,000 on that grant remaining. If I want to see the details, again, blue is drillable in Martus, and I can further drill down into the transaction details or the budget as well. Now, one other thing I'm going to show, and there are other reports here that we don't have time to go into now with lots of flexibility, but I do want to show the custom report builder. So over here on the menu, if you do want to get certain reports built inside of Martus where you have columns and rows in different orders and even add some more formatting options, that's where the report builder comes into play. We're going to give you some templates to start with, or you can create one from scratch. But just to show you a couple examples of this, I've created what I call this a butterfly report, where on my left wing over here, I'm showing current month actuals, budget, and then prior year current month actuals, what those differences are, as well as on my right wing, the year-to-date numbers, budget, actuals, and then the prior year-to-date, and those differences. Notice at the top, you can also create other scorecards to reflect a summarization of the data below. And one other quick example, other charts and graphs can also be created in Martus. So you can modify these reports, get them in a lot of different orders, and even do other formatting on the reports themselves. So at a high level, this is going to give users the ability to have that on-demand option to come in and view the reports, track budget versus actuals based upon the permissions for the areas they have access to.
All right. So you can see that it does kind of have that Excel feel, but there's obviously a little bit more going on there, a lot more functionality, but a familiar format for you. So now upcoming, we have our next poll question. So wake up and let's answer this poll question so you can get your CPE credits. And now we're talking about input from department heads because our next subject is going to be about collaboration. So a lot of times when we are talking with CFOs about the budget process, they say that they do most of the work. They take last year historical data and they try to combine it with what they know is going to be happening and do all the work with plugging numbers in and creating the next budget. And this really takes a lot away from the rest of the team, where there's no insight from at the department level or the program level. There's no real ownership of saying this is what I believe is going to be happening for what is under my control. So it really provides a lot more accountability to have that collaboration and just to have all of those other people participating in the budget process not only alleviates some of that time and effort that is needed from the CFO, but it spreads it out and really creates it a group effort where everyone is focused on staying on budget and creating that budget so that it is as true to actual as possible, so that everyone knows what to expect. So let's look at the collaboration in the system with Joseph now and see how that actually works.
All right, thanks, Robin.
Yep.
Okay, so what I'm showing on my screen now, notice I'm in the planner section, and this is where we are creating budgets and new forecasts. What I have on the screen is a consolidated view of our 2025 budget that we're working on. And then you might ask, well, how did that get created? So I'm going to bring you over here to the planner setup section. This is kind of like an admin area for where the admin that's responsible for getting budget set up is going to get that going. And you'll see this create budget option. Now, when you create a budget, you can do it as an empty budget. You can base it off of a prior year's budget, or even base it on a prior year's budget along with actuals. So we're not going to go through all of that. It's real quick to get it set up. You'll choose, the budget you want to base it on, or even actuals, and then give it a new name, and then create that budget. What that does is going to give a starting point with budget worksheets for budget users to then come in and create a budget. So before I go into those worksheets, I do want to point out the collaboration piece one more time. So this is a consolidated view of the budget. Now, there are other views. You can do other analysis, looking at trailing 12 and annualized and last year's actuals for comparison, side-by-side comparisons. If you want to have different versions and scenarios, you can compare those as you're creating them. But this consolidated view, behind the scenes of this, talking about collaboration, behind the scenes of this, when I drill into office supplies here on the budget, we're going to get a listing of budget worksheets. Now, the reason I bring this here is this is showing us where someone has budgeted some office supplies in these different areas. Now, the idea is when our users are working in these different areas, these worksheets, based on their permissions, Martus will take everyone's work from all of these areas and consolidate that in real time into one overall budget so that we can see everybody's work coming together in real time and then the effect there on the bottom line of that budget. Now, you're going to see the same flexibility in reports over here where I can filter the budget down and see those specific areas of the budget, slice and dice that data. I can also modify my rows and columns like we showed before. So I want to see a breakdown of my department's budgets at a high level by account, We're just modifying those rows and columns. So again, easy, flexible reporting for even these pre-built reports. Let's talk about those worksheets, because this is going to be really kind of that typical user experience. So this is a different view of our worksheets. I'm showing just one of my locations right now and the different departments in that location. Over here to the right, before I go into one, notice the status. So right now, all of these are set to be open, meaning people are working on them. When they do submit one of their worksheets, though, notice the owners and approvers, it's going to send an email to whoever that approver is. And notice you can have more than one approver at different levels. That approval will come into Martus, and they'll review the budget worksheets, and then they can review it and then leave any comments back to that user. I clicked on one that was already done, but when it is submitted, they'd have a comment box here and can leave comments back to them. So I'll kind of walk through that process a little bit. I'll click on that pencil icon here. And we're going to come here and talk about the typical user experience. So I am in this location. I'm in our accounting department, and I have some budget lines here. Now, again, those budget lines were automatically created based upon the setup of the budget initially that we discussed previously. I can also view reference data. So when I click that blue box, notice I get a blue section up here. And this is showing me in reference my 24 actuals, which that's my current year in my demo environment, plus remaining budget. And my actuals, again, they're in blue, which means they're drillable. I could drill into that transaction detail if I would needed to. And then I have budget for the last 3 months. Now down below, this is the budget section. I have a couple different ways to get this going. One of those, we want to do an automated feature. We could say, let's initialize this. And I could take my current year actuals, but let's assume we're not through with the current year just yet. So let's take budget for the last 3 months of 2024 and apply those to 25. At the same time, I can do an adjustment on these amounts. If I set the values at 100%, notice I basically just copy down those same amounts for those accounts. My legal fees at $154.50 becomes a starting point for next year's budget. Now I can also click into a budget line as another method and type in amounts, tab through, similar to Excel, hit enter, and then it saves that line. But a lot of our users, they'll actually use this budget widget, that little calculator icon. And the reason why they like this is because it gives them some quick adjustment types and also gives them the option to put in notes. So let me give you a few examples here. Let's pretend that we should budget a monthly amount of office supplies in this department at $100. So notice it made a monthly spread. I could do a weekly spread. So let's put our date back to the first of the year and hit preview. And you see it makes a weekly spread, 5 weeks in January, 4 in February, and so forth. I could do that on a biweekly, quarterly, or annual spread as well. So if it's $1,000 for the year, spreads it evenly, $83 a month. So real quick, easy calculations for them. You could also build another custom spreads. You could do what we call a burn rate, where we take maybe the trailing 12 actuals. Keep in mind, this is what would be syncing in from the accounting software, and use that as a starting point, or even adjust that. So if we're looking at the trailing 12 and I want to bump that up 5% for next year, we'll put 105 in there, and notice the 1523 becomes the 1600. Now I can put notes in here, right? As I said before. So if someone's reviewing my work for approval purposes, they know how I got to these numbers. We'll just type in something very simple there. I'm going to copy that same note down. Now I can do other adjustments still, or still add more notes. Let's go ahead and save it like this. And you'll see back in our worksheet that office supplies line has a blue marker there now. And what that means is there are notes. And as we hover over, we can see those notes. So again, helpful for those approvers who are going to review the work and understand how they got to those numbers. Now you can also have targets on worksheets. This one's got a $285,000 net loss target, so just focus on expenses, and I'm still under that. Now, if I was over that target, that number would turn red and be like really stick out like a sore thumb as an indicator that I need to do something probably more before I submit the worksheet. Now, one more feature I'll show on this budgeting process, and then we'll wrap it up, bring it full circle here, is a special purpose worksheet. And I'll get to more details on this in just a second. But let me start with a special purpose worksheet and why you might want to use it in the budget. Sometimes you'll have circumstances like this where you want to itemize specific budget lines. And so here I've itemized my different software subscriptions because I've got them all posted to the same account. It'll aggregate those totals down here below, concatenate those notes. This is that one budget line we saw in the worksheet, but I have all the detail listed out here. Now I'm going to come back around to this a little bit later up above when we talk about some modeling and calculations, but let's just consider this being the itemization of specific budget lines for now. So back in our worksheet, right, there's that one budget line, but all the detail is listed in that special purpose worksheet. Now, for certain integrations, we do support statistical accounts. You can budget for those and even use them as drivers and calculations for the budget. You can upload attachments for any supporting documentation. We talked about the approval process so that if I'm finished with this and I hit submit and lock, that's when it's going to lock it down. It sends an email to the approver. They come into Martus, they review the worksheet just like we see it here, and then we'll approve it or deny it and leave any comments back to that user. So to bring this full circle on the budget, talking about the collaboration and the automations happening in the background, all the work that we just did, that's now consolidated here. So if I come back and I search for or filter for my 200 accounting department, right, there's the work that we just completed. It's already been consolidated into that overall budget here. All right, so I'm going to pause there.
So that seems to be a lot easier than just sending somebody an Excel sheet and trying to compile that all together, right? So now we're going to go on to another feature that we've seen a lot of chat activity about. Wendy's going to talk to us about the API functionality here.
Yeah, so on this next slide, you can see the API integrations. We have just a few listed here. We put the others that there are pre-built connections with Martus for in the chat. So it happens overnight, no intervention on your part whatsoever, which is great, keeping everything in sync with your GL system. However, even if you didn't have one of those pre-built connections, there is an option here to use a CSV export or import to keep your data in sync. So that's also an option. And I'll pass it over to Joseph so you can see just how easy it is.
All right, thanks, Wendy. So yeah, it's very easy with the integration. When we do the initial configuration, depending upon the system we're integrating with, a lot of those have APIs that we already have connections with, and so we'll get that integration set up, and we're able to sync in as much historical data as you would like. And if it is a file-based integration, we can bring in as much historical as well. What we do in those situations is we map to a GL detailed transaction export. And so it's just a simple export and then import of that data right into Martus. Now, as far as the integrations are concerned and the updates, with the API integrations, notice up here under my dashboard updater, I have a chart of account sync and then my dimension sync. Now, there is an on-demand sync. So just to give you a quick example, if I wanted to sync my chart of accounts, I'm queuing that up. And down below in my task queue, you'll see it's working. And then real soon it will show success. That's the idea. And then bring in any updates to our chart of accounts. There's also a nightly sync that brings those updates in as well. So there it is. It's finished. It made a couple updates. And so there's a nightly sync that will also bring those updates. So you don't have to worry about keeping this in sync between your accounting software and Martus. The actuals, that's also syncing nightly. We sync the current 3 months, meaning because we're in February right now, we're syncing December of 24 through February of 25. But as you can see here, I can go back in time and easily sync prior periods and historical data as well. So there's that automatic nightly sync and then an on-demand sync. And then down below in the task queue, you'll see all the jobs that I've run and what is processed and updated here in Martus.
So quite an easy way to sync all of your information as often as you want and not have to add in accounts or cost centers or personnel every time that those change. That's really important to help with. So now to go on to another hot topic in the chat, actually, talking about the modeling. So this is really one of the key features of Martus, I think, because it's a budgeting tool. This isn't just an application that you can plug in numbers and make your budget. That's great. it really helps you model how you're making your budget. What is driving the numbers? How are you figuring out what those budget numbers are? And that not only helps you to think through and really put a lot of logic to your budget and to share a lot of more information onto where those variances happen, but it helps you year after year. A lot of teams do budgeting once a year, and you forget why you said certain things last year in Excel, where this allows you to leave those notes and to really have those worksheets that you're building it out and you can see exactly what you did from year to year. So this part of Martus is just really powerful, and I think makes it stand out from a lot of other applications. So now Joseph is going to show some of those ways of building those drivers and doing that modeling in the system.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Robin. Okay, so let's bridge the gap from what we just showed on the budget worksheets a few minutes ago to what we call the special purpose worksheets again. So as you recall, we had went into this accounting worksheet and we had created the budget for accounting, but then I also highlighted this special purpose worksheet option right here where we talked about the software subscriptions. So if I go into that again, this is where we left off. We talked about itemizing budget lines using these special purpose worksheets. We call them SPWs for short. But at the top, notice the Microsoft Office. So this is going to be a very simple example to get us started, where we have a rate times a quantity to drive this total cost. So in my case for Microsoft Office, it's $13 per user per month times 25 users drives that $325 cost. Now, all of these lines that you see here, those are all customizable. You can add your own lines, create new sections, the descriptions, that's the lines that we see here. But let me show you what this calculation looks like. First of all, notice these first two lines, they're non-posting, right? They're just drivers in the calculation. The third line is set to post. So when I click into this one, instead of using that budget widget that we showed before, I chose formula. And then here's the formula that we're using. Now, that looks daunting, but don't let it scare you because all we're doing here is we're inserting a line that we created, right? So there's the rates, that's that line. Here's our operator here. It's that asterisk there for the multiplication. You can see other Excel-like functionality that you could have in these formulas. And then I inserted my second line, the number of users, right? That's what's in the background right here. So that gave us that formula without having to type it in, and you can see the results over here to the right. Over here on the Info tab, we do want this to post to the worksheet, and so we said it's going to post to our software account, and in my case, I have a project in scope as well. All right, so that's a real simple example of how you can use some budget drivers. Let me give you a few others of how you might use special purpose worksheets. So I have a listing of many different options here. Let me talk about this first one at the top. This is one where, maybe we have some rooms or some beds that we're going to calculate revenue for. And I've got 50 beds or rooms available to us in a month. I've got days in the month to help with that calculation. We're going to budget a certain occupancy percent, and then I've got a daily bed rate. So all of that's working together to drive that total gross bed revenue right there. That's one option. Let me go back and we'll look at a couple others. Let me do some membership subscriptions, right? So maybe we have different subscribers, current subscribers. We're going to budget for some new subscribers. We're going to have some churn in there, and then that total subscriber that we're going to use to calculate against our subscription fees. And then that's going to drive, again, some gross revenue for us on subscription fees. So just another example of how you might use different drivers in your context to drive revenue or even drive expenses from that. Go back and give you a couple other examples. Think about allocations as well. I'm going to show you like a utility or a rent allocation, right? Other overhead allocations just in general. What's nice about this is you can define your own allocation basis. So in this case, I've actually taken square footage. You might do something different like head count, but you set that up and we're going to use that to allocate our utility costs. Again, that could be any cost you want to allocate. This is going to be based on square footage, and so I'm going to allocate to 3 different departments. Department 110 square footage is 4,250, which is 28% of that total. So therefore, they're going to get 2125. And on down the line, same thing for Department 120 and 130, based upon their square footage. So if we were to go to their budget worksheets, right, they're going to have utilities allocated to them with those different amounts. All right, let me go back. And talking about driving costs based upon other budget amounts even. So we have a concept in Martus that we call reporting groups. Reporting groups allow you to take specific accounts and dimension combinations into that group so that we can use whatever's been budgeted to those accounts and dimensions as a basis for another calculation. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm driving my bad debt expense automatically based upon what's been budgeted to my fees and sales income group. So we're going to budget 3% bad debt. And so on our bad debt expense, roughly $25,000, $26,000 month over month. So taking other budget amounts to drive, COGS or other expenses. So lots of different use cases there using special purpose worksheets to build those different models and then drive the budgets.
All right, I'm going to move us along. The crowd is actually getting restless to see personnel. So we have one more subject matter before we go to personnel. And it will be quick and important, obviously. So bear with us. We need to talk about some scenario planning first. This has become more and more important these days in order to do some testing on different scenarios. Whether you get a new contract or you lose a contract or staffing changes or you pick up a different product, all of these different changes are really great to be able to do in scenario planning so that you can see best worst case scenarios, do some risk mitigation, and just know how to handle some of the situations that you're going to encounter based upon these scenarios. So we're just going to check this out really quick and then hold on, we'll be getting to personnel next.
All right. Yeah, I think this is a very valuable tool as well. And so we've got two different ways to do some of the scenario planning. One is I'm going to first start us off in the budget management section, and I'm going to go back to 2024, and you're going to see how we can have different versions like I was discussing before, and even do different forecasts. It's real simple to set these up. All you would do is you would take an existing budget, maybe a board approved budget to start with. We have clients that will do monthly reforecasting, quarterly, mid-year. So you take an existing budget, make a quick copy of that. And in that new copied version, I've loaded actuals, right? So in this case, in my forecast 9+3, I would have loaded actuals down here, January through September, because I'm on a calendar year, and then forecasted or made new projections for the last 3 months. Now, to give you a visual of what that actually looks like to work in, you're going to see the same thing on the worksheets. This time, we're just working in the forecast 9+3. So if I go into the accounting worksheet again, this is a new forecast, not the original budget, and I look at those budget lines down below, when I click into these, notice what happens. It grays out the months, or it's frozen them, so I can't change the actuals. But I have the last 3 months open to still make new projections. So you can have these new forecasted versions of budgets, as well as different scenarios of existing budgets. That's one way, doing it through these budget worksheets. The other option is to come over here to our forecast module. And we've got different ways to create forecasts here as well. Now, I've already got a couple set up just for the sake of time, but notice up here when I create a new forecast, I have 3 options: a multi-year projection, a what-if analysis, or a what-if analysis by month. Now, when you set these up, you choose, like if it's multi-year, how many years? If it's what-if analysis, how many scenarios? And then choose your dimensions. And if you want to go at the account level or maybe a little higher level by account category, you select those parameters. Choose a budget to base that on, and it'll create your forecast. And what that looks like, if I come back over here, let's start with a 3-year forecast. I'll click Edit, and you're going to see it's based on the parameters I chose, which in this case was department and account category. So a high level, I see my current budget I chose to base that on, And over here to my right, the columns, I've got a 26, 27, and 28. Now, when you select these cells, you can do one or multiple, right? But when you do select them, you're going to see this adjust selected box comes up. And then I can do specific amount adjustments, flat amounts by increases or decreases, as well as percentage increases or decreases. So here I've made just some sweeping 5% year-over-year changes, right? You can see those notes, it aggregates those. And when I view the results, you'll get this nice and clean report to show you the differences from the current year, right? What those next 3 years would be: income, cost of goods, expenses, and the overall differences to the bottom line. Now, really quick on the other type of forecast, the what if, and then from here we'll head over to personnel in a second. We're going to hit edit on this best case, worst case funding scenario. So here I've taken an existing budget and I said, all right, best case, what if we get a 10% funding increase? So I basically just taken all these different groups and did a flat 10% increase. You can, of course, vary that from group to group. My worst case, what if we lose 25% of our funding, right? And then down below, same thing on the expenses, right? Best case, worst case, what do we have to do? Click the results. You'll get that cleaned up for you again to see that best case, worst case compared back to the current budget we're basing this on, right? The differences in income, and of course, the bottom line again. Help you make strategic decisions as you wade through these different scenarios.
All right, so I lied. We have one more one more thing to do. We're doing another poll real quickly here. And then Wendy is going to talk to us about personnel.
All right, personnel. I think it's always a big topic. It's probably what is driving most of you to attend today's call or look for a budgeting tool. With 70 to 80% of your expenses, budgeted expenses, coming in the form of compensation and benefits, companies are really looking for a better way to plan for personnel. And Martus gives you the tools for that granularity, allowing you to budget at the employee level for salaries and other related costs, even benefits, as you can plan for your insurance coverages at the tier level or associated premium for each employee's election. Or you could do it at a higher level, taking a percentage calculated off your gross salaries or different pay types. So there's a lot of options here. There was a question, I think, in the chat about pooled employees. You can budget for a group of employees rather than each individual. So maybe you have 12 FTEs in a certain program. You can lump them all together in a pooled approach. You can plan for your new hires. There's allocations available in the system, so you can allocate your staff to the various programs or grants or whatever it may be that you have as far as your dimensions. There's scenario planning, which is also a very great feature. We see a lot of clients that are trying to plan for maybe a dollar increase for their hourly staff or various other strategic decisions, and they really want to see how that plays out in their budget. So Martus has all these bells and whistles and a lot more, so I'll hand it over to Joseph so he can show that to you.
Thanks, Wendy. So I'm going to come over here to my personnel section now, and I'm on the scenarios. So just like we were talking about in the planner section, how you can have different, versions and scenarios and forecast. Similarly, you can do the same thing on personnel budgeting. So in 2025, I actually have two different scenarios running right now. I have a base personnel scenario, basically where everybody's at right now. And then I made a quick copy of that. And I said, all right, well, what if we did a 4% COLA? Or you could, what if insurance increased? Or what if we added new positions? It is going to be position-based budgeting. So when I come to my positions tab, we'll see a listing of all of the positions I have right now. These could be tied to specific employees, as you see here. They could be vacant positions, or you could even do what we call pooling a position in Martus. And what I mean by that is, instead of having like 7 counselors in this example, I could have 1 counselor position for a certain area that represented 7 FTEs. So you're going to have that flexibility to set those up the way that you would need to. Now, when we go into one of these, I'll click that pencil icon, show you a couple of different things that we're tracking. So there's that pool option. There's our FTE count. Start and end dates. If it's left blank like this, we're telling Martus to budget all 12 months. But if you have seasonal employees, or maybe someone's not going to be hired until a certain date, you can control that using those fields. Down below, we're going to tell Martus where this position needs to be budgeted, right? So what dimensions do they need to hit? What I would say around this is going to be their primary dimensions. And what I mean by that is we do have the ability to allocate personnel. So if we need to split somebody across different locations, departments, projects, grants, right? We can do that. And I'll show you an example here in a second. The pay types. So when to use the good terminology there, right? That's all the different ways that we compensate employees here in Martus. And so these represent pay, benefits, taxes. We can even do statistical information with certain ERPs. That's all going to be part of setup as you get Martus built out. And there's, of course, things that will be the same from client to client, but you're going to have some that may be very specific to you, different stipends, fringe, and things like that. Going back to something that Wendy said as well, if you want to build out like medical insurance to show different tiers of coverage and what you are delivering on behalf of those, right? You can do that as well. So based upon their election, it pulls that amount into the scenario for us. Now back in our position here, I'm going to click View Detail, and it's going to give us a breakdown of this position by pay type. So here we're looking at Daisy. I can see each of those pay types, what the total amount is for the year. So this would be the total fully loaded amount for Daisy, taxes and everything included, and the monthly breakdown as well. Now I could do something really cool from the screen where we would do quick adjustments, right? And so you could say, let's update these pay items. Let's take salary. Let's update that pay item here and start it in a certain month. So if we want to increase Daisy by 5%, right? We do this in a different scenario, but just for demo purposes, you'll see she got that bump of 5% starting in February. Anything dependent on that, like retirement matches, taxes, all of that gets updated automatically. So you do that for one position, or you could do that for all positions, or use your filters to do it for specific segments of the budget. Now, on the allocation, I'm going to come to my allocation analysis. We do have an allocation set up for Daisy. So if I look at Daisy before any allocations, this is where she would hit the budget, right? That budget worksheet. However, when we bring in our allocation, you're going to see that I've allocated Daisy to these different departments. I could further allocate her to different locations and projects and grants if we needed to, but it's real simple to allocate her across those different dimensions. Now, if I remove my filter and I say, let's put this in a dimensional view, again, flexible reports here, we'll hit load. And I can see everybody rolling up to this location, department, and projects. We have 4.21 FTEs, about $372,000. And there's a little bit of Daisy in there from her allocation. If I wanted to filter it for a specific project or grant, I'm in the wrong place there. There we go. I can filter it, right? And I can see this grant has 3 FTEs, about $307,000. Now, when it goes back to the budget, I'll end on this right here. On the summary tab, you're going to see when it goes back to the budget, it's going to go in summary by account and dimensions, right? Back to those budget worksheets. And I point that out to say this, that all of that detail that we've just seen by employee names and pay type detail, that's going to stay in personnel budgeting, which is a permission-based area, right? Down below, you'll select the budget you want to post it to, and then click Post to Existing Budget. Now, you might be asking, how do I get all this information in? Well, you can certainly put it in the system, all right? Add new positions in the system, make updates. There's also import-export features as well. So hope this gave you a good overview on personnel. I know there's a lot to talk about there, but lots of options in Martus.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing with that with us, Joseph. So we've gone through a lot of very great details for how Martus helps with our budgeting. Now, Chris, we're going to go back to you and talk about what you as Martus see as a successful budget. What are you aiming to do?
We're aiming to give hours and hours and hours back to financial executives and their departmental heads. What we see things become wholly transformative in that you've created a level of transparency and visibility to where financial executives have the time to be truly strategic. And then what's the really cool underlying benefit is you create this fantastic financial literacy that spans the organization where you get people truly engaged in understanding the numbers beneath your organization.
Absolutely. And we like to look at that as the full picture of this continuous monitoring model here, where you are able to do the full planning within the system, wrap in that performance with the actuals that you're dealing with, and be able to do analysis right there with what you created to begin with. And this is so powerful in order to be timely with all of your decisions, make the right decisions because you're looking at why there are variances. It really helps to pull people in, like we talked about with that collaboration, and create that accountability where finance is just not an island on its own. Finance can be part of the whole group, and everyone can be accountable for part of that. And so that really helps with increased insight and increased financial controls as well. So we find that this is really important. So we have our last poll question here. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the timing of implementation with Martus. And I think, Chris, you're going to be talking to us about that for a second.
Here we have it, everyone. It's really an incredibly condensed implementation process. I think if you're evaluating other budgeting reporting FP&A solutions, you'll realize that in 6 to 8 weeks, it is exceptionally accelerated when you consider other products that are months in the making relative to implementation. And the other important thing is that a lot of the reporting that in other products you have to wait until the implementation is done. And many of these out-of-the-box reports are available very, very early in your implementation process. And those are some key differentiators.
Yeah. Yeah, and we find that this is one of the easier applications to implement because you can really have a phased approach and be able to take as much as you can at the time that it works for you. So that's been really helpful for a lot of clients. And I know we're up against the end of the webinar here. We've been trying to answer all the questions coming through to the chat. If you want to talk more, Wendy and I are available. We can answer any question that you have, and happy to talk with you more about the product as well, and just about basic budgeting. So we're happy to field any more questions that you have. So thank you very much for joining us today. We are so glad that you were able to make it. Hope you learned something today, and we all hope to be talking to you again in the future. So thank you very much.